you could have essentially ethnic and cultural hatred of the West, hostility of the West, emanating from this idealism, emanating from universalism, emanating from the left, which is post-ethnic. They think of themselves as post-ethnic. They're certainly not ethnic loyalists in any sense, although they're allied with ethnic loyalists in the minorities. So this is an interesting, I think, a sociological model of how there could have been a rise of anti-Western hatred going back to the late 19th century. Thanks very much for your attention.
Research and study have come to certain conclusions, which each has its own validity. But in the end, it's like, what I'm interested in is how we can all live together in some peaceful, harmonious way. And that's really my intention of participating in tonight, was just to argue that actually the self-hatred grows out of a lack of understanding of the possibilities, I would argue, of how we can live together in more harmonious ways. So whatever we want to call that, you know, it seems to me that, I mean, every person in this room is different. That doesn't mean that we have to hate each other or that we have to fight each other. And I really agree with what Sergio was saying about, and I resonate with a lot of what you were talking about, that we should have the right to say what we feel and understand and have that freedom of expression in a society that's supposed to be a free society. And it is a problem that's threatened through violence instead of it being challenged. And to me, I remember once talking to an activist and he said, well, whenever I become violent, it's because I've run out of ideas. And it was a very interesting point. I mean, he was actually involved in throwing yellow cake, literal yellow cakes at the American warships that came out, or something to do with uranium. And he said to me, like, you know, because I'm very much convinced that non-violence is the only approach, that we need to find solutions that include everyone, and that different positions are valid. And that's what I'm really interested in. So, to me, the self-hatred, ultimately, hatred doesn't lead anywhere, so we need to find some way of loving ourselves and loving each other. That's my position.
Yes, yourself. Now, come on, this lady at the back. She's had a hand up.
Okay. Possibly two parts to the question. To Dr. Salter. Can you hear me? Is that all right? Further to the Brown and Kaufman books that you mentioned, are you aware of Decline and Fall, Europe's Slow Motion Suicide by Bruce Thornton, Encounter Books? Have you read it? I've just finished reading it. It's available from WEA Library if anyone's interested, and it's excellent. The second thing's an observation, but you might like to comment. Given that I've been involved in with supporting communities trying to fight mosques being foisted on them, and have noticed that councils that approve the mosques always quote diversity and tolerance as a reason to approve them. And given that diversity, in my view, is a description, it's not a value, I wondered if you were aware of that being used in that particular circumstance, or had anything on that subject to add.
No, I wasn't aware of the council lines, but I did see on the news a week ago, 2 days ago, at the Gold Coast. You aware of that?
Yeah.
The conflict?
Yeah.
And there was
Currumbin.
7:30 report or something done.
Currumbin and also Maroochydore.
Right. And those people opposed to the mosque won on that occasion. And the analysis indicated, journalists asking questions, indicated that it was just sheer political power that caused the council to vote that way. They knew that they would simply lose their office they'd be voted out. So there was strong political pressure.
But it's been appealed, as it always is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But look, diversity. This is for me again just one of the ironies that diversity is stated as an ideal, and I must say, from the point of view of restaurants, I have to agree. So I'm trying to find ways to agree to be positive about it. You know, people. It is nice. It is nice to have diversity in some ways. Why do we have tourism? Why do people fly overseas? It's to see diversity of environments and cultures and people, I suppose. And if you can have them in your own neighbourhood, I suppose that can save a lot of kerosene, flying kerosene,
CO2, let's
jet
save
lag
the
and so on. But diversity has these costs which are never discussed. You know, if we're going to be honest about it, let's put both sides of the ledger. There are tremendous costs, and there are also these benefits. Let people decide. But instead, you hear a mantra, this diversity mantra, without qualification. Quite extraordinary.
Who is your question directed to?
Sorry, Mr. Ben Weiss.
Well, hang on. All right, take it at the back. That's okay. You can wait.
Ben, I was just wondering, I'd like to make a bit of a statement and also a question. My name's Nick Folks. I lived in Arakoon in far north Queensland for 4 months in an Aboriginal community, and I saw the devastation there, the social devastation, and to my opinion is that, not opinion but actually fact, that the Aborigines today are more dispossessed than ever before because of leftist policy. Tying up land with Aboriginal land councils has actually been the worst thing ever, and I saw these Mugabe type individuals driving around $120,000 Land Cruisers and had no regard for the local Aboriginal population. And also, as you said before about Aborigines being the first people, what about the First Nation, the Anglo-Celts? Do we also have a right to protect ourselves against the Asianisation of Australia? Because we're going to become a minority in the next 20 to 30 years.
Well, I was arguing that we all have a right to be here. So, not quite sure what your question is.
Well, I'm saying that you're saying that Aborigines need to be protected, but we're not being protected under multiculturalism. You support multiculturalism. Mate, our Anglo-Celtic culture is just being absolutely trashed by the ethnic elites and by our political elites. And that's not fair. We're not being protected. Where's our culture being taught in the schools and all the institutions? All they do is rubbish our culture and rubbish the Anglo-Celtic peoples who built a fantastic nation. And if we go, Australia goes. And that's what we're being faced with.
And that's why what I was arguing was what I call an ecology of culture. Actually, everywhere in nature, diversity is a strength. Monocultures in nature are a disaster. You get one disease in a monoculture and the whole culture is decimated. That's why things like permaculture are being adopted. That's why all sorts of different ways of, you know, when we look at culture, it comes from agriculture. And agriculture depends on diversity.
I'm not a plant. I'm not a plant.
We're talking about culture. Cultures grow.
Culture, yeah.
And we grow cultures.
He might be a mushroom.
And actually
Kept in dark, fed a
mushrooms,
lot of shit.
there are mycelial networks. Mushrooms have networks.
But they're all mushrooms. No diversity in
Mushrooms have
mushrooms.
networks that communicate. I'm serious. You look at the scientific evidence.
You mean magic?
You might
mushrooms.
laugh at me, but there's a guy called, there's a fellow who talks about how you can actually reclaim oil polluted soil with mushrooms. You can grow mushrooms and they will detox the soil.
Like
and
marijuana.
that's research that's being done. In places like Ecuador, people are doing it. So, you know, I'm sorry.
The lady, yes, please.
Hello. I came tonight not expecting what's just come before me. My first question is directed at you. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Were you up there trying to be provocative, or were you speaking from? I wasn't quite sure. I couldn't decide whether you took a provocative stance or that was your stance.
That's absolutely my
Right.
No, provocative. No, probably, I'm not a provocative person by nature. I'm consultative.
But no, this is a question. Okay, but having you say that to me, what you said up there for me was very provocative, and I very seldom get so riled, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know. Anyone else, or is it just me? You know, I
Might be the racism coming out of you. I don't know. Could be anything. Could be the racism coming out of you. You know.
People would
Plausible.
like to have the benefit of your response. So.
You know, I was just astounded at some of the things you said. Just most of it, actually. I mean, you know, am I standing alone here, am I?
Yes.
Oh boy. You know,
Specifically, what was
everything that came out of you was just like, I thought, is this guy taking, you know, is he playing on this? And that's why I had to ask you.
Well, I had no knowledge of your thinking, and I wasn't having a shot at you.
Oh no, but I move in a world where I don't come across.
You've got your
I don't
answer.
come across such strong attitudes, and I'm absolutely astounded actually by yours. And is it Keith? Frank. Beg your pardon. But you know, I walked into a school hall, and I wouldn't think there's the Australian flag. I'm an Australian. You know, I don't know if I'm proud to be an Australian. I don't consider myself a self-hater, but I wouldn't notice it. I think, thank God, that there's a flag up there. To me, the Australian and the Aboriginal flag stand side by side, all separately. But I'll stand by either. You know, and I think it's just a reflexive way in which different people think. You know, and when you think separation, you live separation. You know, and I don't think that you will ultimately
I
win.
have friends
Let me
who live
clarify,
with
please.
these. They
I
go home.
don't believe in separating nationalities but I believe in separating unworkable ideas from proven and tested ideas and practices. Some things just don't work. Islam does not work. For anyone,
Look at the Yazidis in Iraq and Syria.
They went to Africa and they took slaves for the 400 years. Over 100 million Africans have been killed by the Muslim slave trade. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? They went to northern India, massacred 130 million Indians over the last 400 years, and that's been whited out from our history education system. Don't talk about it, but it's reality.
The British Empire.
Well, there's a mix.
There's no saints in it.
Of course, they're better than the other one,
but
but
there's a mix of right and wrong in the British Empire. But I'm saying that we have to reject what's wrong and dangerous and harmful, and to uphold and maintain and cling to what works and what's right and helpful to people.
I just want to say one thing. When you reject something, you need to reject it across the board.
Look.
All cultures, all religions, but not isolate one out.
Well, if
And
there's,
I felt that's what you did. That's what I felt.
I isolate Islam for its head cutting, its FGM, its lies about killing as a ticket into 72 virgins. I despise evil of Islam because I think of the millions of people who've been massacred and slaughtered and tortured, had their hands cut off, their legs cut off by Islam. And that, to me, as a logical, scientific, free-loving person, is dead set wrong. Look, I will condemn anything in an Australian Western culture that is wrong. Some things are wrong, some things are right in Australian culture. I will condemn what's wrong, clearly wrong and harmful, and I will uphold and maintain what is valuable and right and works. Australia has never had a civil war.
Next question.
yeah, it is. It's coming. Funny you should say that.
Okay, and that's Paul. Who are you directing it to?
Let's see, I'll direct it to Sergio and Reverend Keith.
Thank you.
Hiram Johnson once said the first casualty of war is truth. Reporting the truth, no matter how terrible or showing, is what motivated the journalist Foley. He was preparing to risk his life for journalism and the broader public interest. My question basically is, how can we have a national truthful debate on Islam without the country going into civil war.
Because as long as we can still get into a room like this and have this discussion, there's hope. Yeah. And I'm going to cross over to the lady's question as well. I could guarantee you have never read the Quran. And then your other answer would be, well, you probably haven't read the Bible or the Torah or anything Buddhist either. Okay. Education is very, very important. But I try to break down everything in a critique form artistically. I guess I think differently. Well, I'm actually inspired to actually maybe do my masters in some of the topics tonight and the areas. But because I know that in the last 4 years, every time something new happens, there's 100 things that I have to research more. And the problem is having a family, having a child, and having to read books and having to do this becomes very, very difficult with lack of time. But we try and make it. But I'd like you to think, hopefully it's answering your question as well, I simplify it to the point that we, the tolerant, should never be so tolerant that we tolerate the intolerant. It doesn't matter if it's green, left, right, or whatever, because I understand where you're coming from, because you're coming from a position of equality. But your equality has to still be across the board, that you don't then fall into the trap that you allow minorities to have more equality than the Anglos that Nick's talking about or anyone else. Like for me, I believe in our Indigenous people, but I believe that they need to stand up, stop being victims of the scenario, because to me they are equal to all of us, and they have to stand up as equal members of Australia, not victims of being black Australians. But when it comes to Islam, if you look at it not from a religious point of view, but a political point of view, and if you can just spend a bit of time in researching the things like, because I doubt you support slavery or polygamy or female genital mutilation. That can be argued it's more cultural than religious, because it's not part of the Quran per se, but it is part of the culture. And so it becomes very, very complex, the whole thing of Islam. Like I said before, I accept Islam for what it is. So I accept Hezbollah Tahrir in Australia in their format of a political party trying to create a caliphate within Australia by peaceful political means, different to IS or ISIS overseas, that are doing it from the violent teachings of the Quran. But they're real, they're not going away, and Australia's going to be involved in a very negative battle with Islam for at least a generation or 30 years. And we have to accept that we've got young people in Australia, because of multiculturalism, that have been allowed to grow up like the chant of Jimmy Blacksmith. Our generation has read it probably, that a half white, half black Australian didn't know where he belonged. Well, that's on steroids when it comes to our multicultural members that have come in from the 80s onwards. And we've got a problem because it's not one generation, it's almost 3 generations now. All the way from the Scaff brothers, we should have started noticing there was a lack of respect from one part of our society to another part of society. And we just have to be able to say, things are not appropriate. If you had children, things are right, wrong, you just got to be able to say, that's inappropriate, we don't agree, without being called racist or bigots or anything like that. And without it becoming a religious or gender or racist war. There are just things that are right and wrong, and we have to go back to those principles. For me, you know, being attacked, I've kept turning the other cheek, not because I'm Christian from that point of view, but because I don't want to lower myself to the standards of the thugs that beat me up. Right? And that's where we have to always look, because as soon as and that's going to be the biggest crime that multiculturalism creates within Australia, and I'm not talking about the world platform, I'm talking about the Australian platform, is if multiculturalism lowers the rest of the Australian community to the level of the bullies and the thugs, no matter what cultural or religious background they are.
bullets and guns exist everywhere.
The question you asked was, how can we have a national debate about Islam without having a civil war? Is that the correct question you
Well,
asked?
that was the question, yes.
Okay, the answer is this. I do not attack Muslims, personally. Why are they a Muslim? It's because they believe the Quran is from God. So I attack the Quran with 110% of my energy. And I found in thousands of cases of Muslims, when they ditch the Quran, when they throw it in the rubbish tin, their brain switches to be a normal Australian human being, governed by the conscience and also Bible values of what's right and wrong. But if they believe the Quran, their brain is radically altered to kill as a ticket to paradise. And if you don't do it, Quran says you go to hell and Allah will punish you severely. Now that is a worry when you have a lot of people who have that thinking. So I suggest the only way to solve the problem is to attack the Quran and destroy its credibility. And if you look at my YouTube site, Answers Course, you get lesson 1 and describes how to do that.
I'm sorry, I try my best to express my perspective. The first things I want to say, I think the artist.
Is he speaking?
Speak up.
Yeah, put it on.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I try my best to express it clear. But the first thing I want to say, I think you already expressed a lot. Because I sitting here, from the first speaker to the last, I a little bit worried because the things we talk about today, for me, is very complex issues. And we can't really just address that by the